Welcome to our flipped classroom, where knowledge of math makes things easier. Today we'll be learning operation properties. There are 5 videos in this series, and this is the last of the videos in this series. That's why our fraction shows 5 of 5. When you're done with this video, you should have seen 5 out of all 5 videos, or the whole amount. We'll be learning the Mathematics Common Core Curriculum Content Standards relating to number sense, specifically the 7th grade standards 7NS A1D, in which we apply properties of operations as strategies to add and subtract rational numbers, and 7NS A2C, in which we apply properties of operations as strategies to multiply and divide rational numbers. We've already learned the commutative property in our first video. Then we looked at the associative property, the distributive property, and the identity property. Now we're going to look at the inverse property of addition and the inverse property of multiplication. The inverse property of addition says the sum of a number and its inverse, or its opposite, the number that has the same absolute value on the other side of 0 on the number line. So if you have a -8, a +8 would be the opposite. If you have a +3, a -3 would be the opposite. So the sum of a number and its opposite, its inverse, when you add them, you should get 0. That could be represented using variables this way. N, which could represent any number, and you add its opposite, should give you 0. We'll look at numerals to demonstrate that. 8, and you add -8, should give you 0. Let's take a look at these chips. If we have 8, and we add 8 negatives, each one of these will cancel out. A 1 minus 1 is 0, a 1 minus 1 is 0, and so on. So 8 minus 8 is going to give you a 0. The inverse property of multiplication says that the product of a number and its reciprocal, we're multiplying the inverse as reciprocal. The inverse property of multiplication could be written this way with variables, that n, any number, and its reciprocal, flipping the fraction around, putting the denominator on top and the numerator on the bottom, when you multiply them together, you should get 1. Let's look at numerals to see if that's right. 3 times 1/3 should equal 1. Well, we had learned before that 3 could be represented as a fraction. Every fraction is also a division problem. And the denominator that would make this whole number 3, the denominator would be 1. So we could represent 3 as 3 over 1. So 3 over 1 times its reciprocal, 1 over 3, would be 3/3. You don't need a common denominator when multiplying fractions, so we just multiply straight across. 3 times 1 equals 3, and 1 times 3 equals 3. And 3/3 can be reduced to 1. So again, the inverse property of addition says that if you add a number and its opposite, they'll cancel out and give you a sum of 0. And the inverse property of multiplication says if you multiply a number and its reciprocal, you'll have a product of 1.